KFIZ News Time, 8:25. Rolling along on today's edition of Landscape Smart, presented by Rademann Stone and Landscape Company. Call in now with your questions. Next caller through gets right on the air. 923-1450 or 1-888-900-1450 to call in and ask Ron and Master Gardener Carol a question. We also accept your emails. Send those to kfizstudio@gmail.com. If you can include a picture or pictures, always makes it a little bit easier for them to help you troubleshoot whatever you need.
One of the questions I've been getting here now, of course, the past week is everybody's getting anxious and they want to get their winterizer, their step 4 down on their lawn. And, it's always one of those where I always keep, we used to try to tell people to wait until Halloween to do that, to do step 4. So you want to make sure you at least wait until Halloween. And even now it seems like you have to wait another week or two. If you start jumping the gun and if you put your winterizer down last weekend, you're going to be in big trouble this week because after the rain that we got last weekend and maybe another little rain on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, your lawn's going to be growing here with all the warm temperatures and warm soil yet. So hold off. Don't get, you aren't going to save yourself any trouble by doing it a week early this year. You're going to get caught with a lot of extra mowing in the first week or two in November if you try to jump the gun. So hang on.
Hang on.
We've got another caller. Good morning. You are on Landscape Smart, presented by Rademann Stone and Landscape Company. What's your question for Ron and Carol?
Good morning, and thanks as always for the program. I just have a couple comments. Every year, that's what I do with my green tomatoes, is I wrap them in newspaper, and then I put them in a box so that they're a layer rather than, I used to do it in like a brown paper grocery bag, and I have those up until Christmas. They're not as good as picking off the plant red, but they're a heck of a lot better than what's in a grocery store.
Well, that's good advice.
And the other thing is, my husband got one of those three cucumbers in a pack thing, stick it in the hill, and I think the purpose of that is in case one or another dies. Well, all three of those sat in the hill. We just pulled that plant last weekend, and I bet we picked 300 cucumbers. I picked a pale ice cream bucket as I cleaned out the bed, and they were different shapes and sizes, but still, I was still harvesting, and we did regular trips to relatives and friends. It wasn't like a one-time, would you like, it was averaging 6 cucumbers a visit to share, because we almost ran out of people that were, sure, we'll take another round. But I have never, ever seen cucumber plants last pretty much past August, just because we start with that early sunset and the dampness, and then the mildew sets in, or the fungus, and it pretty much can't be producing cucumbers anymore because of the leaves dying off. But we still had green in small areas. It was just the week before that it started where the leaves were really getting hit, but the blossoms were still coming.
I had the same thing with my zucchini this year. It lasted really, really long.
Oh, good.
But my cucumber, I only do one plant. My cucumber bit the dust already in August, I think, which is fine by me. Then I have enough anyway. So.
Well, and we had relatives that had planted cucumbers and had the same thing. They had to pull them out early. They had gotten very few out of the plants and couldn't figure out what it was. They weren't watering too much. It wasn't too dry, but it just never worked out. And boy, it was nice to be able to share as much as we did, and we're looking forward to doing it again next year.
Do you have that seed packet so you can tell us what it was?
No, I think he just got something that it was something from Fleet Farm or Menards, and that was it.
Okay. Good deal.
Thank you again for the show, and I hope you guys continue to have a good fall.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's nice if we all have a nice fall, that's for sure.
It definitely is. And if you need cucumbers, give her a call,
Yes.
right? She's gonna
Nice, yeah.
she's gonna hook you up. All right, let's go back to the phones. You are on Landscape Smart, presented by Rademann Stone and Landscape Company. What is your question for Ron and Carol?
Good morning. I have just planted an arborvitae, and I'm wondering, do I have to fertilize it? It's about 4 or 5 feet tall.
Well, was it fertilized when you didn't put any fertilizer in it when you planted it originally here? Just
Correct.
yeah, it's good to use a balanced fertilizer. Again, at I like the NutriPack packets because those are a balanced 16-16-16, so you get the phosphorus and the potash, which helps for rooting in and things like that. Now that it's planted, it's probably easier to use more like a water soluble, more of a Miracle Grow or one of those. And if you fertilize with that, typically we tell you not to use that type of fertilizer but at this point in time, you could fertilize it with a Fertilome or a Miracle Grow, and because you're not going to really encourage any new growth either way, but just use a balanced one, that's more 20-20-20 or something like that, not real high in nitrogen and because what you want to do is just help it get re-rooted in as soon as possible. And I would for sure mulch it because we are kind of at the end of the season as far as planting evergreens and especially arborvitaes. So put mulch around it, put a generous circle, go out, another 6 or 8 or 12 inches out further than the original hole that you dug. And I'd put it in there 4 or 5 inches thick here right now. That just keeps those ground temperatures a little warmer and helps it re-root in right now. So.
Okay. Is there such a thing as putting on mira acid?
Muric acid would still be okay too. That's pretty much the same thing, and that actually it just has a little extra sulfur in it, and sulfur wouldn't hurt. Arborvitaes typically don't need extra sulfur, but it wouldn't hurt either. It wouldn't.
Okay.
So yeah, you could, if you have muric acid on the shelf in the garage, go ahead and use that.
Yes. yeah. There is some in the bag yet. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I will do.
Yeah, these some of these things are interchangeable a little bit, and if you have them, I would use it. It doesn't do you any good sitting on the shelf over winter.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your advice. I enjoy your show.
And then keep watering it too.
Oh, watering. Okay.
Yeah, water it, and if you've just planted it, I'd water it almost at least once a week here yet, all the way through into November. As we get towards the end of November or Thanksgiving time, then you could maybe back off a little bit, but don't just stop watering it. If it's nice out, keep watering it. So.
Okay. And then, like, if I put the hose on there for this tree, do I wait maybe 15 minutes?
Yeah, just put it on like half flow, or even what I always tell people is kind of put it on a flow but not a drip. A steady a steady flow that's just a little bit beyond a drip. And if you leave it on there for 20 minutes or a half an hour, that should be enough, and that way it soaks all the way down. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye, and thank you for the call. Oh, we had someone calling in. Call back. Oh, there we go. I think we got him now. There we go. Our next caller is on now. You are on with Ron and Carol on Landscape Smart. What's your question?
Good morning. Question for Ron is, what time of the year is a good time to spade and move a tree, and to what size can you actually move? And I'll hang up. Thank you.
Well, that's kind of always a. See, now you ask a question and you hang up. Now I have more questions for you. You're going to have to
Call back.
You're going to have to
Call back, please.
Yeah.
What size of a tree? Well, it never really matters how big the tree is. It matters how big the root system is. And because some trees, you could move, an 8-inch or 9-inch or a 10-inch diameter tree, and some only a 6-inch tree works out well. And that's because an oak tree or a honey locust tree, they have a more of a root system that fans out and goes deeper, where some are more of a fibrous root system, so they're a little bit easier to move. So the size of the tree depends on the variety of tree, but pretty much if you're measuring the trunk size, measure the diameter, and if it's 6-inch or 7-inch, it can probably be moved. Now, if he's asking about evergreens, there you pretty much have to go by height, and there it seems like once you get beyond into the 20-foot range, it becomes difficult. And it becomes difficult, not the trees, a lot of times they'll make it okay, but if there's a lot of, if they're too tall and there's a lot of wind resistance up there, then they have a tendency to blow over. They might live if they don't blow over, but it's really difficult to prevent them from blowing over, because you can't, if you have a 25-foot evergreen, well, how do you stake it?
Yes.
If it happens to be, if you happen to be planting it between 2 or 3 telephone poles, you could rope it off and tie it off to the telephone poles and it would stay standing. But not a lot of people plant trees in between telephone poles. So, then you run the risk of it blowing over before it has a chance to reroot in, and all it takes is one storm, with 25, 30 mile an hour wind gusts, and then pretty soon your tree is tipped over. And leaf trees, maple trees, there you can bend the rule a little bit more, because typically if you're transplanting them here right now, and we are transplanting 25-foot trees right now that don't have leaves, or we're waiting until they don't have leaves is maybe a better way to put it. We haven't quite started yet. This year we had to move things back just a week or two because everything kind of held their leaves longer. So those will do here now at this time of year, because if we do get the strong winds, the wind blows right through them because they don't have leaves on. And then they'll reroot here now and reroot again in March and April before they get leaves. And then usually next year the leaves are a little small yet, so which is good, because if they leafed out and grew well, then it would actually almost be to their disadvantage. But if they are leafing out and growing well, that just means they rooted in well too. So there's a long answer to a simple question, but
It's not simple.
But we've been transplanting trees at Rademann's, and I've been involved in it from the very beginning. So we've got 40, 50, almost 50 years of experience. So we've kind of pretty much learned what works and doesn't work by now.
I believe that.
And you try bending the rules, and sometimes you can bend the rule and it works, and sometimes you bend the rule and it breaks. And we've kind of found, so typically what I do is if you want a tree transplanted, I can pretty much tell you your odds of it working out. And I was actually visited a site yesterday over in the Ripon area, and he had some larger spruce trees, and I said, well, they'd you might be able to make it work here. I says, I don't really recommend it, but he was actually in a little bit of a hollow, and he was kind of protected from the south and the west a little bit. And I said, if I was ever going to try moving a 25 or 30 foot spruce tree, you would be the one this would be the time I would try it, but I still wouldn't really recommend it. There's just too much, and then and you can't stake them. We've tried it, you need 50 steel fence posts because you have to get up high enough. You have to be up there 15 or 18 feet up, and you're taking, you need a step ladder that gets up that high, or a boom truck that would lift you up that high, or and all of a sudden you're just better off buying a 20-foot tree than trying to transplant a 25-foot tree, because it just doesn't usually work out well.
All because of the wind.
Right. It's more, a lot of times they live until they blow over. But
okay.
You got to remember, an evergreen tree lives in your living room for a couple months every year without roots.
Christmas, yeah.
So you don't even know if your tree is surviving or not, because you plant a tree like that at this time of year. And, and I hate to be the Grinch that spoils Christmas here for you, but they're out there cutting your Christmas trees right now. Mm-hmm. And they hold them for a month or two, because if you saw them on the lot already now, you'd never go there to buy one. So they cut Christmas trees off here, 2 months before Christmas, and then they live for another month or so in your living room. So, you can have a dead tree, that transplant a tree, and it looks alive for 3, 4, 5 months, and it's really dead already, and you just don't really even know it. So that's why, you want to, and those roots have to be regrowing and regenerating for it to work out well, because if the roots aren't growing, then the top's not growing either, and it's going to die. So anyway, that's
Was the gentleman going to move it, or has that decision not been made? Down in the gully.
I think I talked him out of it.
Okay.
And that's I'm not a real good salesman that way. I should be talking him into it. But, you spend that kind of money, and then you work that hard, and it's not easy moving a big tree like that. You have to go in there with a couple guys and tie up the bottom branches, because otherwise you go around there with a tree spade and you smash all the branches and break them off, and then the tree doesn't look good. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of effort that goes into it prior to even trying to move it. And you don't know what's underground. You try moving a big tree like that, you might hit a big root, you might hit a rock, you might hit 2 rocks. And then you don't get a good solid ball, and then so there's a lot of risk associated with it, and then you're kind of throwing good money after bad. So typically, what I told him is, I wish you would have called me 5 or 6 years ago. We could have transplanted these for you. And he says, well, I didn't own the house 5 or 6 years ago, so I didn't really have the option. And that's always, that's typically the case, is most everybody, they buy a new home, and the previous homeowner had a different thought than they did. So they want to open things up, move things around, create some screening, and or they had other trees that died in the meantime. So they want to shuffle the deck, so to speak, a little bit. But so in this case, he didn't own the house, so he couldn't really do it 5 or 6 years ago, but that would have been a better way. It would have worked then, or I would have at least tried it.
Sure would have.
And you said this one's like 25 feet or whatever, and like a 20-footer would have been able to work if you buy it new and plant it.
Yeah.
That surprised me when you said that.
And you wouldn't think there's much difference between 20 feet and 25 feet. But
it's probably 5 or 6 years of growth, if not more. Yeah.
Right. And there's just so much more bulk up there on top. And in that little bit of, if you have a 20-foot tree, it's pretty full down at the bottom, but remember, an evergreen is pointed up on top. So you only have, you have 12 feet of fullness at the bottom, and then you have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 feet of narrower growth on top. So you don't get the wind resistance up there, but you add another 5 or 6 years onto that tree, and that moves that wind resistance up that much further. And there too, if it's a 20-foot tree, we can take our 12-foot step ladder and stand on it and get and stake a 20-foot tree yet, because you can tie it off up there at 12 or 13 or 14 feet up, and then you don't worry about the last 5 or 6 or 7 feet. But that's just the difference between being able to stake a tree and not being able to stake a tree.
Oh, there's so much to this.
Carol, are you looking for a side job? What do you think? You like to get way high up there, working on those trees?
I always wonder about that, but you've had a lot of dry conditions to be doing this in.
Well,
this
and
fall.
that's the other thing. It's kind of easy to get around right now. And I was actually in someone's yard earlier this morning, and he's over on the west shore of Lake Winnebago, and we were looking at driving across his lawn, and he's got, you would think that, and he's got some pockets in there. And I says, no, I think we could get across here with our tree spade truck right now, because it was pretty high and dry through there. So, that's somewhat unusual too at this time of year.
Yes.
It is.
Definitely is.
So we're going to try and get that accomplished here too before it gets too late.
Well, we're due for a break, but we got another call. So we'll take the call, and then we got to take the break, or else I'll get in trouble. So good morning. You're on with Ron and Carol. What's your question?
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I was just wondering, I have two questions, two quick ones. Can I keep Gerber daisies over the winter? And the second question is, what is your procedure for storing dahlia buds over the winter? Okay, I'll quit.
The Gerbers, I do not believe that's a perennial, is it? That's the colorful ones, not the Shastas, daisies.
He hung up.
We hung up. Okay.
No, you have to answer it
I
3
guess
ways
so.
too now.
Yeah. I believe they are annuals and not perennials, but you could look that up, or I will on the computer and see, but I'm pretty sure they're not perennials, so you would have to, they're just going to die. And then what was the second question?
Crickets.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is it was dahlias or bulbs?
Dahlias, yes. You dig them out just as you would gladiolas or any of those other ones. I store them in a cardboard box with sawdust in it. You can do newspaper too, but it seems to leave too much air around them, because you can't, you're not necessarily going to roll them up real tight inside of newspaper.
Or sand?
Some people use sand, yes, I've heard of that. And just something so they stay high and dry. And that's about all that you need to do with them, except to remember to plant them next year. Sometimes I hear people that, it's like the first week in July, and they want to know if they can still plant them, and you probably can, but they will start growing if you let them sit too long. So
Probably
something
start
loose,
growing right in the box by
They
then.
would, yes.
Yeah, right.
So I hope that takes care of the questions. Otherwise, call back.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Lori has an email we've been sitting on. So we will promise, Lori, we will get to your email after the commercial break.
So, Rademann's open today, open till noon, open Monday through Friday till 4:30. And we're just 3 miles south of Fond du Lac, and you could take Highway 41 south out of Fond du Lac, north out of Lemira, north out of Milwaukee. Just keep driving. You'll get here eventually. And then east on County Trunk B, just a quarter of a mile. So right at the crest of the hill.
KFIZ News Time, 8:54. A few minutes left before we get to Badgers football, so we could still fit another call or two, 923-1450 or 1-888-900-1450 on Landscape Smart. I did tease Lori's email. We got a little busy there, so we didn't get a chance to answer this until now. But Lori's question via email is, I have a clematis plant. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Facing east, which is way too big for its trellis. It flowers great, and I'm hoping not to impact next year's blooms. Should I cut some of it down now and put in a new trellis, or would that be a better job for spring?
Well, all depends on when you have more time, I guess. A clematis can be cut right off at the ground in the fall. If you like it to just be gone, that works. I do that some years, especially if it's a little more ragtaggle than usual. You can also just let it keep growing, and it will re-green up in the spring in most places. Sometimes you have to do a little trimming with it.
Get some dye back in there.
You'll get a little bit. It works either way. If you want to replace the trellis that it's on, then this year, if I were you, I would cut it off at the ground. Make sure you mark it so you know where it's going in, and then either put the new trellis in this fall or next spring, and it should be just fine. That is a plant that you want to always have. That bottom part of the clematis on the ground needs to have some kind of cover, either some mulch, or I have like a real small running kind of plant that covers the ground there, a viney thing. They do not like to have their feet get hot. So you want to take care of that, especially. Mine's almost hidden behind a tree now. If you let it grow, it stay up there in the winter, they get really cool seed heads. They look like big burrs, and they're kind of loose, and they just look really cool. So if mine has a lot of those on, I let it up that year, and if they don't, I cut it off. So that's the long answer to a short question. Mm-hmm. So it can work either way, though, as far as when you cut it off and when you don't.
The other thing is this year, you have to remember we had a little longer growing season, too. So if it starts growing a couple weeks earlier in the spring, and it definitely did this year, and we just had our first freeze here this past week, which it may or may not have even froze, depending on where it's situated there. So this year, a lot of these vines that kind of start over from scratch each year and grow out this year. So maybe next year it won't get as big either. Sometimes it is a year older, the root system's a year older, but it may not, if it starts out later and finishes earlier next year, it won't. So sometimes they outgrow a trellis one year, but not the next. So
time for one more call, about 2 minutes to go. Good morning, you're on with Ron and Carol. What's your question? Hello, you're on Landscape Smart. Go ahead. Going once? Are you there? All right, we're going to jump to another line here. Good morning, you're on with Ron and Carol. Quickly, what's your question?
Yes, I'm calling about the Gerber daisy.
Yes.
I keep them every year. I just put them in the basement, and the foliage does come off, but a couple times during the winter, I water them, and by spring, they're looking healthy.
So you treat them, you treat them just as you do.
Pardon?
You treat them just the same way you would when you bring a geranium in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not an annual plant that can survive in our area. Am I correct on that?
No, you'd have to bring it in.
You have to bring it in.
Basement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the call.
Yeah,
That was good because I was not just 100% sure that they were.
well, some of those daisies are, there's so many different varieties of daisy, and some are perennial and some are annual. So
Right.
that's well, or at least in Wisconsin, that's the way it
That's
works.
true.
So anyway, I guess they're playing our song. Rademann's open today until noon, Monday through Friday till 4:30. If you tuned in late, you can jump on YouTube here yet this weekend and catch up with the first part of the show or last week's show. Landscape Smart 24 will bring you right up. So,
All right. Ron and Carol, have a great weekend.